Welcome to EconWorks. We live in an era of massive platforms, global supply chains, and unprecedented market concentration. But behind every headline about a merger or a legal settlement, there is a deeper mechanical struggle for control. On this show, we pull back the curtain on the invisible forces shaping our economy. We look past the talking points to examine where law, power, and markets actually collide, and how those collisions redefine the world we live in. Coming to you from the EconWorks desk, we're diving into a breakdown of the systems that run our modern life. This is EconWorks. Today's episode, the chaos of unintended consequences in antitrust.
Imagine you are an acrobat, balancing precariously on this really perilous tightrope spanning a massive gorge.
Right, a very high-stakes situation.
Exactly. And on one side of this chasm, you have this bright, thriving city. It's labeled market innovation and growth. You can see happy users. Commerce is just, flowing freely.
Yeah, everything is working the way it should.
Right. But down below, waiting to catch you if you slip, are the jagged rocks of the risks of regulation.
Which is just a maze of red tape.
Yeah, red tape, lawyers, and just endless bureaucratic machinery. And the thing is, this isn't a circus act. It's the exact situation global economic regulators find themselves in right now.
It really is.
So welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at an incredibly timely Substack article by EconWorks. It's titled, Editing Beyond the Breakup, The Complex Reality of Competition Remedies.
Right, and that's part of their effing Antitrust series.
Yeah, exactly. And that striking conceptual image, the tightrope walker, I think it completely rewrites how we need to think about this topic.
It really does. I mean, it visualizes the stakes perfectly. Because what we are looking at here is a fundamental shift in global economic policy.
Oh, absolutely.
We have these massive industries, right? Big tech, ticketing giants, aviation, healthcare, and regulators are just aggressively stepping in to reshape them.
They are not holding back at all.
No, they aren't. And I think, to be fair to both sides here, the core question driving this entire debate is incredibly complex.
Right.
It's essentially, how do we ensure markets remain fair and competitive without, fundamentally breaking the very products and services that modern society relies on?
Which is the ultimate modern balancing act.
Yeah.
And to understand how they are trying to answer that question, we first need to look at the tools they are actually using. Right?
Yes, the actual mechanics of it.
Because they aren't just sending strongly worded letters to CEOs anymore. The EconWorks piece outlines a very specific regulatory toolkit.
Yeah, the source material breaks this down into three primary approaches or remedies that regulators deploy when they determine a market is broken or monopolized.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is behavioral remedies. So think of the government stepping onto the field as a very active referee.
All right.
They aren't changing the structure of the corporate team, but they are laying down highly specific rules governing exactly how that team is allowed to play. A prime example of this is prohibiting self-preferencing.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because self-preferencing, that sounds like a lot of legal jargon.
It does, yeah.
But in practice, self-preferencing is basically when a giant search engine automatically pins its own shopping service or its own travel booking tool right to the very top of your search results.
Right, simply because they own both the search engine and the tool.
Exactly. So the behavioral remedy is the regulator stepping in and saying, hey, you can operate the search engine, but you cannot tilt the board in your own favor at the expense of competitors.
That's a great way to put it. You can't tilt the board, so that covers the behavioral side. But the second tool is drastically more aggressive.
This is the big one.
Yeah, structural remedies. This is the classic old-school antitrust move that makes all the headlines. It involves forced divestiture.
Breaking them up.
Right. The regulator looks at a deeply integrated, highly successful business and decides it simply controls way too many parts of the supply chain. So the remedy is to force that company to sever its business units into distinct, independent entities.
And the Substack actually includes this brilliant infographic to make these abstract concepts tangible.
The robot one.
Right. Yes. For structural remedies, they use the image of a robot that has just been completely dismantled. Its mechanical arms are detached over here, its internal gears are just scattered over there.
It's a very stark image.
It is. And looking at that, it sounds like regulators are playing a high-stakes game of Jenga with multi-billion-dollar companies.
Oh, absolutely.
You pull out one structural block, like one arm of that robot, and you are just hoping the entire tower doesn't collapse on the table.
The Jenga analogy is highly accurate, and what's fascinating here is the sheer spectrum of severity in these tools.
Right, because they are so different.
Exactly. A behavioral remedy is just changing the rules of the game. A structural remedy is tearing down the entire stadium.
Yeah, there's no going back from that.
No, a structural breakup is a point of no return. You are taking a complex machine that was heavily engineered over decades to work as one cohesive unit, and you are literally slicing it in half by government mandate.
Which sounds terrifying for the companies involved.
Yeah.
But then there is the third tool, which feels very specific to the modern era, right? Interoperability mandates.
Yeah, this one is heavily focused on the digital sphere. Interoperability mandates essentially force tech platforms to use open standards or APIs.
Application programming interfaces, right?
Right, exactly. So that entirely different services can plug into one another. If a company has built a highly secure, closed ecosystem...
Like a walled garden.
Yes, a walled garden. This mandate forces them to install gates and allow third-party developers and even direct competitors to walk right through and connect their software.
Which naturally leads to the biggest question here. Why pull out these heavy-duty, potentially destructive tools in the first place?
Right. Why risk tearing down the stadium?
Exactly. And the source material actually makes a very compelling case for the regulator's intent, because it all comes down to protecting the consumer.
It does.
Because when a single company controls too much of a given supply chain, it's you, the listener, who ultimately pays the price.
I mean, the fundamental argument for strong competition enforcement is that without it, markets just stagnate.
Right.
You get predatory pricing, and consumers become functionally trapped. The EconWorks article highlights the strategy of breaking chokeholds, and they point specifically to the U.S. Department of Justice's case against Ticketmaster and Live Nation.
Oh, man. Anyone who has tried to buy a concert ticket in the last 5 years knows this pain. You stare at a screen full of exorbitant convenience fees, and you know exactly what this chokehold feels like.
Yeah, it is a very relatable example. The DOJ is targeting an alleged monopoly that controls both the promotion of the live concerts and the digital ticketing platform itself.
So they own the whole process.
Right. And when one single entity controls both ends of that transaction, critics argue it creates an unavoidable chokehold. It locks in the concert venues.
Because if they don't use the software...
Exactly. If an independent venue refuses to use their specific ticketing software, they risk losing access to the massive artists managed by the promotion arm.
Wow. So they have no choice.
None. And by eliminating the competition among ticketing platforms, there is zero market pressure to keep prices down. The result is those everyday fees you see at checkout.
It basically functions as a hidden tax on the fan. But it's not just concert tickets, which is, entertainment. The source also points to regulators trying to cut through middlemen in areas that are literally life and death.
Yes, healthcare.
The healthcare sector is seeing intense scrutiny right now, specifically regarding pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs.
Right. The FTC and the DOJ are looking very closely at PBMs and massive entities like United Health. Because the American healthcare system is an incredibly complex, highly consolidated network.
To say the least, yeah.
PBMs operate as the middlemen between the pharmaceutical drug manufacturers, the local pharmacies, and your health insurer.
And what's the goal of stepping in there?
Well, the stated goal of regulatory intervention here is to leverage government authority to untangle these consolidated networks, cut through those hidden bottlenecks, and ultimately lower prescription drug costs for the patient.
And the way the source describes PBMs is just wild. Imagine a toll booth operator who also happens to own the highway you are driving on and the gas stations along the route.
That is exactly how it works.
The PBMs negotiate the prices with the drug makers, but they also dictate to your insurance company what medications are even covered. And they often own the specialty pharmacy you are forced to buy from.
They control the entire journey.
Right. That means they can inflate the toll at various invisible checkpoints without you ever seeing the actual receipt.
And that is precisely why regulators feel compelled to step in. They are trying to dismantle those toll booths. And that brings us to the third goal of intervention, which is preventing digital lock-in.
Which ties directly back to those interoperability mandates we talked about.
Exactly. In the tech space, the goal is to ensure consumers aren't functionally trapped in a single corporate ecosystem.
Because it's just too much hassle to switch.
Right. If all your personal data, your digital purchases, and your smart hardware only communicate with one company's software, you lose your agency as a consumer.
You're stuck.
Regulators want to grant you the flexibility to mix and match. You should be able to combine your preferred messaging services and hardware, fostering true competition, because the platforms have to actively win your business every single day, rather than relying on the fact that it's just too difficult for you to leave.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because usually when we hear the word antitrust, it sounds like a boring Wall Street problem, right?
Just sounds very abstract.
Yeah, it sounds like two billionaires in a boardroom fighting over stock options. But these sources show how aggressively personal this is. It directly affects your wallet.
From concert tickets to prescriptions.
Exactly. From trying to see your favorite band, to getting a necessary prescription filled, to choosing which messaging app you use to text your family. But, and this is the big but, if the government is genuinely trying to save us money and give us more choices, why is there such a massive, sustained pushback against these interventions?
Well, the pushback exists because intervening in a complex, multi-billion-dollar system is rarely surgical.
It's messy.
Very messy. It's almost always blunt force. Skeptics of aggressive regulatory remedies argue that these actions often trigger disastrous chain reactions.
Unintended consequences.
Exactly. And the EconWorks article provides another set of visuals to explicitly depict the fallout of these unintended consequences. The why not side of the argument, if you will.
Okay, let's start with the risks of those behavioral interventions. The article calls this the compliance trap. And the visual they use here is a storefront, but the large glass window is just severely cracked.
Right. And it is cracked by inefficiency.
How so?
When a regulator imposes heavy, ongoing behavioral rules on a company, it forces that organization to shift its primary focus away from product development and toward obsessive legal compliance.
Oh, I see.
Every single new feature, every minor software update has to be rigorously vetted by armies of internal lawyers to ensure it doesn't violate some complex, multi-page government settlement.
So they can't just build stuff anymore.
Exactly. What happens mechanically is that agile, fast-moving tech firms morph into sluggish, risk-averse bureaucracies. It stifles the exact innovation that the market relies on to move forward.
You end up spending all your capital on compliance officers instead of hiring engineers to build a better product.
Precisely.
And then there's the structural risks. Earlier, we talked about the dismantled robot representing the breakup of a company.
Right, the Jenga tower. But in the visual depicting the risks of that breakup, the robot is hastily put back together, but it is holding its head. It's looking incredibly distressed, holding a sign that says, "Nothing works."
Which is pretty clear.
Yeah, this represents operational collapse. Forcing a structural breakup shatters deep integration.
Because they were built to work together.
Right. If you unravel a tightly connected technical or logistical system, you introduce massive friction where there used to be a seamless flow of data or resources. The result is often that the newly separated tools simply don't communicate well anymore. The entire user experience degrades.
And finally, we have the risks of forcing interoperability. The source illustrates this one with a tangled, chaotic web of wires plugging into a server with little red error messages just popping up everywhere.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, forcing fundamentally incompatible platforms to connect isn't just a matter of writing a few new lines of code.
It's not just a software update.
No, it introduces overwhelming technical complexity. When a government mandates forced connections across platforms that were engineered with entirely different architectures, you get severely degraded system performance. But even more critically, security. Right. Yes, you introduce massive, unavoidable security vulnerabilities.
It makes total sense when you think about the architecture. It's like a highly secure corporate building.
Why?
Like a bank vault.
Okay, yeah.
The regulators are essentially stepping in and saying, hey, you must build 50 new side doors into this building so that delivery drivers from any competing company can walk in freely.
Right.
Yes, theoretically, it makes deliveries faster and increases competition among couriers.
Yeah.
But you've just given malicious hackers 50 unmonitored doors to test the locks on. You are compromising the integrity of the entire system just to force the concept of openness.
That is a perfect analogy. The stated goal is openness, but the unintended mechanical consequence is extreme fragility. You broaden the attack surface for bad actors exponentially.
Now, someone listening right now might say, sure, tangled digital wires and sluggish tech companies are annoying, but these are just theoretical tech problems, right?
But they aren't.
No, the source material explicitly pivots here to prove that this isn't just theory. We are seeing the collateral damage of heavy-handed intervention playing out across physical, real-world industries right now.
The real-world implications are stark. Let's look at the aviation industry.
Okay.
The DOJ successfully stepped in to block the merger between JetBlue and Spirit Airlines, and the regulators' rationale was entirely focused on consumer protection.
They wanted to keep flights cheap.
Exactly. They wanted to preserve Spirit as an independent, ultra-low-cost option so everyday travelers would still have access to cheap flights.
Okay, wait, I need to play devil's advocate here. Let's be fair to the regulators. If Spirit Airlines was so financially fragile that missing out on one single merger pushed them to bankruptcy, weren't they destined to fail anyway? Like, why is it the regulators' fault for not letting a massive airline swallow them up?
It is a totally fair question, but it requires looking at the mechanics of how prolonged regulatory battles drain resources.
What do you mean?
Well, when companies agree to merge, they enter a period of operational limbo. They are essentially frozen. In this case, Spirit Airlines was relying on the capital and the financial lifeline that JetBlue would have provided upon closing the deal.
Oh, I see.
When regulators launch a protracted legal fight to block the merger, they aren't just pausing the deal, they are freezing the vulnerable company's ability to pivot, secure alternative credit, or restructure.
So they were just stuck bleeding money while the lawyers fought.
Exactly. The unintended consequence of successfully defending the theory of competition in the courtroom was that Spirit was cut off from its lifeline and pushed straight into Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
So the regulators stepped in to save a low-cost option for consumers, and the actual mechanical outcome was bankrupting the very airline they were trying to rescue.
Yes.
The consumer didn't get a saved airline. They got fewer flights and a bankrupt carrier. That is the ultimate backfire.
It really is. And the source also points to the fashion industry to show how this logic misfires globally.
Fashion.
Yeah. The FTC moved to block the merger between Tapestry and Capri. These are the parent companies of well-known American brands like Coach and Michael Kors.
Okay.
Again, the intent was domestic. Prevent consolidation in the U.S. handbag market to keep prices competitive for American shoppers. But critics of this move argue that this fundamentally misunderstands how global scale works.
Wait, how does blocking a merger of two American handbag companies hurt them on a practical level?
Because in the luxury market, you aren't just competing against the store across the street, you are competing against massive European conglomerates like LVMH.
Oh, right, the global giants.
Yeah. These global giants use their immense scale to negotiate significantly cheaper manufacturing supply chains. And, more importantly, they use their massive portfolio of brands to lock down the prime real estate in high-end malls and shopping districts worldwide.
So it's about leverage.
Exactly. By blocking the American companies from merging and building their own scale, the regulators prevented them from accessing the leverage needed to negotiate those supply chains and retail spaces. They essentially tied their hands behind their backs in the international arena.
Wow. We protected the domestic sandbox, but made it mechanically impossible for American brands to compete on the global playground.
That's exactly what happened. And we see a remarkably similar stalling effect in tech hardware.
With HPE and Juniper, right?
Yes. The source highlights the regulatory scrutiny over their U.S. deal. In the hyper-competitive world of networking hardware, companies need to integrate rapidly to build systems capable of supporting things like massive AI data centers.
Right, the AI boom is moving so fast.
And when regulators apply overly cautious scrutiny and launch prolonged investigations, they delay or outright block the exact technical integrations that domestic companies need to survive against global incumbents.
Because time is money.
Time is a non-renewable resource in technology, and regulatory delays consume it entirely.
So what does this all mean for you? I mean, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, but the core takeaway from this EconWorks analysis is undeniably clear. The modern competition toolkit is incredibly powerful, but applying it is fraught with peril.
Very much so.
Rules that force companies into the compliance trap, structural breakups that disrupt deeply integrated operations, or interoperability mandates that, build 50 unmonitored side doors into secure networks.
Right.
These blunt instruments can defeat the entire purpose of promoting competition. They often end up hurting the very consumer choices they were designed to protect. So the next time your favorite app updates its privacy settings, or you go to book a flight for a vacation, or you stare at the hidden fees on your concert tickets, remember, you are witnessing this exact tightrope walk in action.
It's everywhere.
It is. It's the ultimate challenge for policymakers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fostering a healthy competitive market without accidentally breaking the products, services, and companies you rely on every single day.
And as we look to the future, there is a vital layer to that challenge we must consider. We are entering the age of artificial intelligence.
Boy,
Yeah, a technology evolving at a speed 10 times faster than anything we discussed today.
easily.
So, if regulatory intervention inherently moves too slowly to keep up with traditional digital innovation, how will it possibly govern AI?
That's a great point.
You have to wonder, will this current toolkit of behavioral rules and structural breakups even be relevant in 5 years? Or are regulators attempting to steer a spaceship using the rulebook for horse-drawn carriages? And if their cures are too slow or too risky, who ultimately steps in to protect the consumer?
That is a phenomenal question to leave you with. It really makes you look at that blue figure on the tightrope and realize the gorge they're walking over is only getting deeper and wider. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you. Keep looking for those unintended consequences, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Econ Works. The goal of this series is to move beyond the surface-level descriptions of how markets work and start looking at the actual architecture of competition. We'll be back soon with another look at where the law and economics meet the market. For the full technical analysis and more from this series, visit us at econworks.com. If you found today's breakdown valuable, please subscribe and share the show. It helps us keep the analysis independent. From all of us here at Econ Works, thanks for listening.